We'll be twice as happy to make up for your share.
I lost my wife, Kathy, to the handsome manager George. I tried convincing Kathy to stay when she handed me the divorce papers, but she said she was leaving me and our troublesome son, Kyle, and walked out. I had worked hard to provide for my family, but the long hours left them feeling neglected, and now I'm paying the price. I resolved to live with Kyle, just the two of us. But not long after, I received an invitation to George and Kathy's wedding. The joyful pictures, flooded before me, stirred my anger. What do you think?
Leave it to me.
Kyle clearly had some thoughts about the invitation. He whispered a plan into my ear. And on the day of the wedding, we showed up. One by one, the guests began to look at us suspiciously. My name is Steven Tyler, 52. I'm a businessman working at a general trading company, living with my son, Kyle. Up until recently, we lived together with my wife, Kathy, but she left the house recently. The reason she left is probably because of me. Due to my job, I travel a lot and am hardly ever home, leaving all the parenting to Kathy. And when Kyle started elementary school, his teachers often complained about his problematic behavior, leaving Kathy constantly on edge. Because of that, we started arguing every time we saw each other. I was worried about how things were going, but right then, Kathy left. Although she left, we haven't divorced yet. I tried reaching out to her, but she ignored all my messages. Why is she ignoring me? Every time she doesn't respond, I let out a sigh. Checking my phone every morning has become a routine. Even today, there was no response from Kathy. Let's talk again. I'm waiting for your call. Even if she ignores me, I won't give up. I feel bad about sending her one-sided messages, but it's all for the sake of fixing our family. It's ultimately for Kyle too. He's only in 5th grade. He's going to middle and high school soon, and he needs his mother. I've realized how much I relied on Kathy, so now I take care of the housework. Balancing work, chores, and parenting is extremely challenging. When I get home, I cook Kyle's meals, wash the piled-up laundry, and clean the house. Once I'm finally done with all the housework and relaxing on the couch.
Dad, I need a milk carton for the school assignment tomorrow.
What? But it's already night time. It's past 9 p.m. We had just finished the last carton and threw it away. With a heavy sigh, I got up and started getting ready to go out. Kyle, I'm going to the store real quick. Stay home while I'm gone.
I want to come too.
Kyle fussed, not wanting to be left alone. All right, just get ready quickly.
Yay!
Kyle smiled from ear to ear when I gave in. Since Kathy left, we've spent a lot more time together. I was worried he would miss his mom, but it's quite the opposite. He's always smiling and cheerful. I think he's trying not to worry me. Kathy used to complain that Kyle would often throw tantrums and was difficult to handle. But in reality, he's a cheerful boy who laughs a lot and loves to chat. Even though it's just the two of us, Kyle and I don't have any major problems. It seems the reason Kathy left wasn't because of Kyle but because of me. A month had passed since Kyle and I began living together alone. I visited a client company for work. Thank you for your time today, George. After I greeted, George, the division head of the client company, smiled warmly.
We've met many times already, so let's not be too formal.
We've done business together many times and often go out for drinks. He's 38, younger than I am, but very capable and well respected among his employees. With his chiseled features and smart demeanor, The female employees passing by all squeal with excitement. Compared to him, I'm just a middle-aged man whose wife left. The difference between us is stark, and I gave a self-deprecating laugh.
Is something wrong? You look down.
George asked with concern. Not much. It's just some trouble at home.
If you have anything on your mind, please share it with me. I want to help you, Stephen.
Moved by his kindness, I decided to confide in him. George listened seriously without laughing.
That your wife must be tough for you, Stephen.
Actually, he knew Kathy. 6 months ago, after drinking with George, I invited him to my house. That's when I introduced Kathy to him. I feel embarrassed sharing my private issues with a client.
What are you saying? You're one of our most special clients, Stephen. I hope everything works out quickly.
George's friendly smile cheered me up a bit. When I glanced at his hand, I noticed a ring. Until recently, he hadn't been wearing one. Oh, George, that ring. He scratched his head awkwardly.
Well, I actually got engaged.
Wow, congratulations. The women will be heartbroken that a good-looking guy like you is getting married. In contrast to me, George was radiating happiness. I didn't notice at all. When did you meet her?
About 6 months ago. We started getting in touch, and then I'd go over to her house.
His fiancée seems to be an older woman. When they get married, she'll be an older wife. That's wonderful.
No. I owe it to you, Stephen.
Huh? His words felt a little off, but since our meeting time was up, we parted ways there. No matter what, worrying won't help. I should contact Kathy and have a conversation. I was determined to do that, but I never imagined the reason she left was so close by. One day, I was called in by the teacher at Kyle's elementary school. I headed to the classroom and met with the teacher one-on-one. I wondered what the meeting was about, only to find out it was a complaint about Kyle. Apparently, he's an outsider among his classmates. He's always arguing because he points out their words and can't connect with them. The teacher also complained, saying, he often talks back to teachers. It felt like my child was being unfairly criticized, and I was annoyed. He's a good kid at home. He loves reading and talking, just like any other child. But the teacher replied, he uses difficult words and isn't very childlike. If he disrupts the classroom any further, we'll have to move him to special ed, he said. It's up to me, his parent, to decide that. Don't make decisions without consulting me. Angry, I stormed out of the classroom. I couldn't accept them treating Kyle like a problem child. But as I walked, I calmed down a little. While I'd gotten emotional, I realized my reaction wasn't helpful. Kathy probably heard similar things from the teacher and had to apologize many times. Kathy was doing her best with Kyle's education. If I'd been there for her, maybe she wouldn't have left. When I returned home after leaving the school, I was shocked to see Kathy standing in front of the house. Kathy, what are you doing here? Surprised, I called out. She was dressed beautifully, just as I'd remembered her. She was well known in the neighborhood for her looks, and we had a past of workplace romance that led to marriage.
It's been a while. I wanted to talk about something today.
Her tone was a little sharp, but I was still happy she'd come back. Oh yeah, Kyle will be so happy to see you. At the mention of Kyle's name, Kathy furrowed her brows for a moment. I quickly prepared some snacks for her, since it had been a while. While waiting, Kathy looked around the room.
Boom, it's tidier than I expected.
Oh yeah, housework is really tough. I was relying on you all this time. Kyle peeked out from his room, observing us. "Kyle, your mom's back." I waved at Kyle, forgetting what the teacher had said earlier. Embarrassed, he ducked back into his room. Is he embarrassed?
Doesn't matter. I came today to talk to you, anyway.
Kathy sat down, paying no attention to Kyle. I reluctantly sat down in the chair across from her.
Let's get right to it. Please sign this.
Saying that, Kathy took out divorce papers from her bag. I froze at the sight of the papers. "What? You're kidding, right?"
I'm serious. Please, let's get divorced. I'll give you custody.
Sweat broke out as she declared her intention to divorce. Hold on, just wait a minute. Why divorce? If I agreed to the divorce now, Kathy would never come back. Desperate, I tried to stop her. "I'm sorry for being such a failure. I'll take care of the housework and parenting from now on. Let's live together."
I should tell you, I have someone I love. I plan to divorce you and marry him.
"What?" I raised my voice, then quickly covered my mouth. Kyle was in the next room, and I didn't want him to hear this conversation. "You're going to leave Kyle. He's your son. Isn't he adorable?" But Kathy scoffed. And then she raised her voice.
Adorable. What's so adorable about him? He doesn't listen to me. If I ignore him, he throws a fit. He causes problems and gets scolded by his teacher. When I make a mistake, he laughs out loud. I'm sick of it.
Kathy seemed to have poured out all her feelings. Then she took a breath to calm herself.
Sure, he was cute as a baby, but I can't stand living with that brat anymore.
Are you serious right now? Hearing her feelings about Kyle, I clenched my fist. It was unacceptable for a mother to speak so ill of her own child. I was supposed to be happy that Kathy had returned, but now anger was welling up inside me. Fine, we'll divorce. I'll take Kyle. In anger, I signed the divorce papers. As I did, Kathy gave a sly smile.
It helps me that you'll take him. Now I can live with George.
What?
Oops.
I didn't miss her slip up. Upon hearing the name, I desperately tried to figure out who it was. Is George someone I know? I asked quietly, but she looked uncomfortable and looked down. Answer me.
Come on. You know him best.
Suddenly, George's face came to mind. I couldn't believe George was the one Kathy was involved with. George, how come? Where did you meet him?
Where? You're the one who brought him home.
Hearing this, I remembered the past. When I had George over, I introduced him to Kathy. It seems that's when Kathy fell for him at first sight. And then recently, during a conversation with him, the fiancée he met 6 months ago he mentioned was Kathy. This sudden truth made me weak in the knees, and I slumped back into the chair. Kathy seized the moment to snatch the divorce papers and stuff them into her bag.
I feel so refreshed cutting ties with you guys.
She waved at me, still in shock, and briskly left the house. Learning that Kathy's new partner was George, I was at a loss. George had seemed concerned about me, offering advice, but was it all an act? I was convinced he must have been mocking me in his heart. That thought made my anger towards Kathy and George intense. I decided to confront George directly and called him.
Thank you for calling. This is George.
George, I've heard it all from Kathy. As soon as he answered, I yelled, overwhelmed by emotion. But mentioning Kathy's name brought out his true colors.
So it's out, huh? Well, I'll be taking your wife.
Don't joke. We have a child here.
But she was always complaining about the kid. saying he's in the way because he doesn't warm up to her. Also, she called you a low-income loser.
I never expected to hear such insults about myself from her lover. George's mocking laugh was like a stab to the heart.
We'll be twice as happy to make up for your share.
Shaking with anger, George ended the call. That's when Kyle, who had been in his room, came out and looked at me.
Dad, are you okay?
Kyle. How could I explain this to him? He must have heard our conversation from his room.
Is Mom not coming back home?
Well, that's... Kyle's expression was indeterminate, not clearly angry or sad. He just stared at me and then hugged me. It seemed like he was trying to cheer me up after being abandoned by Kathy. From a young age, Kyle had been sensitive to others' feelings, able to tell someone's mood just by looking at their face. I knew lying would be pointless as Kyle would see right through it. So I decided to tell him the truth. I'm sorry, Kyle. Mom has found someone else she loves, and it looks like she'll be living with him. I felt uneasy about revealing such a harsh truth to a kid in elementary school. However, I couldn't keep it hidden forever. After listening to me, Kyle hung his head before he spoke up.
I knew.
What? Kyle already knew about Kathy's relationship with George.
When you were away on business, a man would often come to the house.
Apparently, while I was away, Kathy would invite George over. Whenever he came, Kathy would tell Kyle, "Stay in your room." But Kyle secretly snuck out and witnessed Kathy and George hugging through the crack of the door. That's how he discovered their relationship.
I'm sorry for keeping quiet. I didn't want to hurt you, Dad.
After apologizing to me, Kyle finally showed his sadness. He'd been torn between telling me or keeping it to himself. I gave Kyle a big hug. I'm sorry, I was a fool. From now on, let's stick together, just the two of us. Kyle nodded silently. We were determined to face the future as father and son. Half a month after divorcing Kathy, things settled down. Kyle had stopped causing trouble at school. To avoid seeing George, I had another employee take over my assignments. Just when I thought things would continue without issue, we received a letter. This is... The moment I saw the letter, I wanted to tear it up. It was an invitation to Kathy and George's wedding. It even included a happy photo of the two, clearly meant to rub it in my face. How dare they smile so smugly after betraying us? Kyle came home from school and grimaced at the invitation. I asked what he wanted to do. What do you want to do?
Leave it to me.
Kyle smiled and said, trust me. Not knowing what he was planning, I blinked in surprise.
Are you really okay with this ending like this? Mom betrayed us to be with someone else.
Kyle was concerned about me but directed his anger at Kathy.
Mom was always angry, always talking on the phone with some guy and never listening to me. But you always listen to me, Dad.
Apparently, Kathy had been talking on the phone with George often. Ignoring her own kid to flirt with a man was unacceptable. You're right. We need to give Mom a little lesson. Kyle and I clasped hands together.
Let's ruin the wedding. There's something I've been keeping secret.
Kyle whispered to me. A few weeks later, Kyle and I arrived at the downtown wedding venue. Among the guests were George and Kathy's relatives and their co-workers. Kathy's parents were there too, and when they saw us, their eyes went wide. They weren't the only ones. The staff and guests were speechless as they saw Kyle and me. But ignoring the stares, we attended the reception.
Everyone's shocked by our outfits.
Yeah, Kathy will probably scream. What do you think you're doing? We whispered and laughed together. Then, Kathy and George entered the reception hall. The other guests welcomed them with loud applause. Kyle and I clapped loudly too and exchanged a glance.
Mom, you look beautiful.
Kyle suddenly shouted toward Kathy. All the guests turned to us, and Kathy shuddered. George's family began to murmur while looking at us. Kathy approached us, her face tense.
You two. Why are you dressed like that?
She pointed at our clothes. Since it's Kathy's big day, Kyle and I wanted to dress to impress. It was understandable that Kathy and the guests were shocked. After all, Kyle and I showed up in a tuxedo with big name tags, each reading ex-husband or abandoned child. It is considered a breach of etiquette for ex-partners to emphasize their past relationship with the bride or groom when attending a wedding. But following Kyle's suggestion to ruin George's wedding, we decided deliberately to attend with such name tags. We stood out like sore thumbs, but we didn't care. In fact, we wanted to embarrass Kathy and George. As a result, George turned pale while Kathy grew red with anger.
We invited you to the wedding, and you break the rules.
In contrast to her anger, we responded with smiles. Hey, I'm your ex-husband, so don't worry.
That's right. Mom, you look so lovely in your wedding dress.
You two.
Kathy tried to storm at us with a furious expression. But George stopped her and calmed her down.
Hey, it's the reception now. Let's just take our seats.
Kathy glared at Kyle and me but quickly put on a fake smile, aware of all the eyes on her. George leaned in to whisper to me.
Don't ruin our wedding out of jealousy, Stephen. Try anything more, and we'll sue.
He tried to intimidate us, but his threats don't work on us. We decided to ruin the wedding. You've got some nerve after stealing another man's wife. There's no way I'll let you end this on a happy note, I said, glaring at George. He seemed spooked and quickly led Kathy back to their seats. She whispered, "Please behave," and followed him. The other guests looked at us suspiciously, but soon refocused on the reception.
Hey, Dad, you think our little jab landed?
Oh yeah, this is just the beginning of our counterattack. The reception continued with speeches from the officiant and groom, followed by the cake cutting. Every now and then, George and Kathy would glance nervously at us. The MC announced, "Up next is a surprise presentation." George and Kathy seemed to think their friends had something special planned for them. They exchanged excited glances and eagerly waited. Suddenly, the lights dimmed and a giant screen was lit up. But even after a minute, no sound or images appeared, and the room buzzed with confusion. Then, out of nowhere, Kathy's syrupy voice rang out, "I can't wait to marry George."
What?
After that, a conversation between George and Kathy started playing loudly. It was a sappy exchange between the two, almost too embarrassing to listen to.
What the heck is this?
I don't know.
George and Kathy were stunned into silence. In fact, all the conversations taking place were recorded by Kyle. While I wasn't around, Kathy had George over repeatedly. Kyle secretly recorded their conversations on his phone without them knowing. When we got the wedding invitation, Kyle suggested playing the recordings during the reception. Then, on the screen, footage appeared of Kathy and me arguing. "I can't stand living with that kid anymore, and are you serious?" Kyle had slipped out of the room to film secretly through the living room door. There was Kathy, abandoning her own kid, her face blown up on the big screen. Friends and family saw this and erupted in chaos.
No, this is a misunderstanding.
Kathy stood in front of the screen to defend herself, but it was too late.
Relax, Kathy.
George tried to calm her down, but she wasn't the only target of our revenge. Next on screen was George. Apparently, while Kathy was out, he had called someone. "Oh, Yasmin, I can't come over today. No, you are the only one I love," he cooed, whispering to another woman. George had been cheating on Kathy.
George, what the hell? You mean you're cheating on me?
This is,
Kathy closed in on George, who was sweating nervously. Their secrets were exposed, and they'd embarrassed themselves in front of the whole crowd. Some of George's co-workers were among the guests, and they were furious after seeing the video. Serves George and Kathy right.
We did it, Dad.
With all the commotion around us, Kyle and I high-fived each other. Kyle had edited all the audio and video. He's still just an elementary school kid, but it's amazing to see this kind of talent in him. George and Kathy noticed us and came charging over.
It was you too. You ruined our wedding.
we paid a lot for this reception. We won't be satisfied until you pay us damages.
I stood in front of them to shield Kyle. You guys are the ones who destroyed our family. You abandoned us, and now you're playing the victim.
Well, duh. Why would I want to keep a defective kid around?
I almost lashed out at her for insulting Kyle, but I held back with difficulty. Instead, I revealed a surprising truth. Kyle isn't defective. He's a genius with an IQ of 200.
Huh.
We recently learned that Kyle was an ultra genius with an IQ of 200. I noticed Kyle's exceptional intellect in the smallest of things. While watching a quiz show together, Kyle correctly answered every question from top-tier college entrance exams. Curious, I had him take a simple IQ test, and he scored over 150. Amazed, I decided to get him properly tested through a certain organization. That organization, SCAT, is a UK-based group of high IQ people. Its mission is to encourage humanity's intellectual advancement, research, and social activities. On a whim, I had Kyle take the entrance test, and he scored a rare 200 among its members. Even in the US branch, where only the top 2% can join, Kyle easily qualified. All the conflicts he'd had with classmates were due to his intellect. His thinking was so fast that his conversations skipped ahead, and even when he tried to correct mistakes kindly, he often sounded condescending and pushed people too far. His elementary school teacher had written him off as a problem child, but that wasn't true. He's just too smart for his surroundings and struggled to fit in. Kyle can recite pi to 500 decimal places. He's a super genius.
You never told me that.
Kyle pointed at Kathy.
You never listened to me. You were always on the phone. You don't like me anymore.
As he spoke, people around started glaring at George and Kathy with disdain.
It's not that I don't like you.
Liar. When Dad wasn't around, you said, I wish you weren't here.
Kyle's cry echoed through the hall. Gradually, the guests' stares pierced into George and Kathy. People threw comments like "what a terrible woman" and "what an awful man" at them. At first, the guests were suspicious of us, but now, all their hatred was directed at George and Kathy. The reason I attended the wedding was not just to ruin the ceremony, but to turn their friends and family against them. After going this far, they must have realized what terrible people they are. Having accomplished my goal, we made our exit. Before leaving, I told them, "You cheated before getting married, right? So, we can demand compensation from you. We'll be sending the claim through a lawyer."
What? Wait a minute.
Stephen, please listen to me.
George tried to hold me back, but I left the venue with Kyle. Behind us, we could hear the angry shouts of the guests confronting George and Kathy. After the wedding, George and Kathy got what they deserved. George's colleagues discovered his cheating and despised him for it. Though he had been a skilled businessman, his poor behavior with women made clients cancel their deals. His reputation with his bosses tanked, and he was taken out of consideration for promotions. Moreover, angry emails poured in from his acquaintances and Kathy's parents, making it tough for him to show up at work. After losing his social standing, George became a recluse and repeatedly skipped work until he got fired. Kathy had a big fallout with George's parents after the wedding was called off. She had hidden the existence of Kyle from them, and they lashed out at her, even suing her for fraud. And since a friend spread what happened at the wedding to others, Kathy lost all her friends. Meanwhile, Kyle and I were enjoying a peaceful life until the doorbell suddenly rang. Who could that be? I hadn't called any services yet. Muttering to myself, I opened the door to find Kathy standing there.
Oh, I ended up coming back.
She said with a mischievous grin. But for us, she was someone we didn't even want to see. When she tried to let herself in, I immediately pushed her out the door.
Hey, what do you think you're doing?
Why are you here?
What do you mean, why? This is my house. I'm just coming home.
She insisted arrogantly. But it's just Kyle and me living here. Don't talk nonsense. You're the one who left after our divorce.
Don't be so harsh. Now that I'm back, let's get close like we used to, okay?
Apparently, she had come to try to get back together. I'd love to know what kind of nerve she has to think like this. Unfortunately, Kyle and I are busy right now. Please leave.
Is Kyle doing well? He must be happy that his mom is back, right?
With that, Kathy called into the house. Kyle. Hey, stop it. You're disturbing the neighbors.
Shut up, Kyle. I know you're there.
Then, Kyle slowly walked out from the living room. Kyle, go back to your room.
I'm home. You must have been lonely without Mom. Let's live happily together again, the three of us.
When Kyle appeared, Kathy called out to him in a syrupy voice. But
Who are you?
What?
Kyle stared at her blankly.
Wait a sec. Are you kidding? Did you forget your mom? Don't joke around.
My family is just my dad. Please leave, stranger.
Despite his childish lisp, he spoke politely, like an adult. Kyle no longer loved Kathy as his mother. He'd thought it over and decided to live without her. Rejected by her own son, Kathy glared at us.
You ungrateful brat. How dare you forget I raised you?
But even as she berated him, Kyle stood firm and stared right back at her.
Please leave. We're packing up right now.
Packing? For what?
We're moving out soon and heading overseas.
What? Overseas?
Kathy's eyes lit up in an instant. She had longed to live abroad since her younger years and even chose Europe for our honeymoon. We've got a connection. That's why we were packing earlier.
Overseas where? France? Japan?
Her gaze, brimming with anticipation, made it clear she wanted to tag along. She didn't look like the same woman glaring just moments ago. But just so you know, it's only Kyle and I who are going.
Don't be stingy. Take me, too.
The shamelessness of Kathy irritated me more and more. Leave now. There's no place for you here.
I know I was wrong. I had no idea Kyle was such a great kid. So let's start over.
As I struggled with what to do with someone who refused to leave, Kyle brought me my cell phone.
Dad, we call the lawyer when we're in trouble, right?
Oh, yeah, that's right. And we haven't gotten a compensation for the cheating yet, so cough it up. When I brought up the compensation, Kathy grimaced.
Even if I owe you, I have no money.
Then have George pay for it. I wish I could make you pay, though. Offended, she clicked her tongue in annoyance.
I ditched that guy. He got fired and became a recluse. Pathetic.
I thought they'd get married, but it seems like they broke up. If you don't pay, leave. Otherwise, I'll call your parents.
Hot, not my parents. They were so mad at me after the wedding and the affair.
Before Kathy could start making a scene again, I forcibly pushed her outside and shut the door. Kyle suggested, let's send a video of Kathy and George to her parents. Kathy's parents seemed to have thought that Kathy married George because she had divorced me, yet they still apologized for their daughter's divorce multiple times. If they see this video, they won't forgive her. Kathy will have to pay the $30,000 alimony and full child support, using up all her assets. She tried to mend her relationship with me, but ultimately failed. Since she repeatedly showed up at our house, we reported her to the police for stalking. After a stern scolding by the cops, her parents reluctantly took her in. But when her parents saw the footage Kyle recorded, they were shocked. They berated her, saying, "We didn't raise you to abandon your family," and disowned her. Kicked out of her parents' home, she moved from place to place, losing her money and support network. The job she finally found was in the nightlife business, but it seems like she couldn't secure a stable income. But this was all a consequence of her own actions. I'll never see Kathy again. Afterward, Kyle and I moved and started a new life. The place was none other than Germany. Kyle was accepted into a German college with his exceptional intellect, skipping grades. I was transferred to the German branch so I could follow him there. Since moving from the US to Germany, Kyle has been thriving. We were initially concerned about travel and tuition fees, but the SCAT Fund provides scholarships to promising students, so we had no financial worries. Kyle studied alongside adults in his favorite field, published papers, and earned his doctorate. I'll keep working for Kyle's future. I won't let him feel lonely ever again.